you're new here, my name is Laurie, and I have a blog called Wagon Wheel Homestead, and that matches this channel here on YouTube for Wagon Wheel Homestead also. And today I'm going to be sharing with you what I do when I wake up and realize that we all of a sudden do not have any bread for toast or sandwiches. This mostly happens in the summertime. It's like, oh dear, we used all the bread last night. What are we gonna do? We need bread for lunch today or whatever. And this also can sometimes happen when I've forgotten to feed my sourdough starter. So I bake with a lot of sourdough if you're new here. And it's always best, you know, if you have active starter and you make like beautiful sandwich bread. And by the way, I have a video that a lot of you really love and a recipe on my blog that a lot of you really love. For sourdough sandwich bread, it's long fermented, right? So all the phytic acid and the gluten's broken down in it. It takes about 24 hours to make from start to finish, although it's probably like less than 10 minutes of active time. So no big deal, right? But it does require active sourdough starter and all of that. And so what do I do when I wake up in the morning and we're out of bread and we're gonna need bread that day, right? It's a busy time of year here in the summertime. Like, what am I gonna do? What I do is I make sourdough discard sandwich bread. So I don't ever really discard my sourdough. I just keep what you would call discard, which is what you don't need anymore when you feed it, right? So you get rid of some of the starter, right? Get it smaller, feed it more flour and water. So that, which is what a lot of people call discard, I keep in my refrigerator. And so when I'm gonna make sourdough discard sandwich bread, which is what I'm gonna show you how to make today, I just take some of that starter and I make bread just like I normally would do for the regular sourdough sandwich bread, but I add a little bit of yeast, and it just helps the inactive starter, the discard in my refrigerator, become active, you know, and raise the bread, right? And I can make a big batch of bread in 3 to 4 hours instead of it taking, you know, 12 to 24 hours, right? It's not long fermented. It doesn't have quite as many sourdough health benefits as the long fermented version, but it's much cheaper and much better for me than if I were to just go, you know, go to the store and buy bread that day so we could have bread for lunch. Like, first of all, that doesn't work with my life here on the homestead. I'm too busy for that. Second of all, it's more expensive and it takes more time. So I am gonna show you how I can spend 5 to 10 minutes making this beautiful sandwich bread, which, by the way, it's just like the regular one. It's nice and soft, and it stays soft for several days. It's absolutely beautiful. This one almost over fermented today, or over rose a little bit because it was 100 degrees here today. So anyway, I'm going to show you how to make this. I use my Bosch mixer. If you don't have a Bosch mixer, you can just do a few stretch and folds to develop the gluten or knead it by hand. But I typically like to use my Bosch mixer because I can literally dump everything in it in less than 2 minutes. And while I'm doing dishes, it mixes. And then I let it rise right there in the bowl. Then I shape it into loaves of bread, put it in my pans, and stick it into the oven. Like, it's so hands-off. And I can have bread for lunch or bread for supper if I mix it up in the afternoon or whatever. So anyway, I'm going to show you how to make this. You can find the printable recipe on the blog, wagonwheelhomestead.com, under sourdough discard sandwich bread. And again, if you have time and if you want to, I would highly encourage you to make the regular sourdough sandwich bread on my site. But sometimes we don't have time, right? Like, life happens to all of us. And sometimes the kids come in, they're ravenously hungry, they want peanut butter and jelly, and there goes all the bread. In those cases, I make sourdough discard sandwich bread. It keeps me from having to buy bread at the store. And I do try to keep quite a bit of bread in the freezer as well. Like, if you freeze it the same day you bake it, it will taste fresh. But sometimes we still run out, and it's really nice to be able to make a quick sourdough sandwich bread. So let's jump right into the video. I like to use my Bosch mixer to mix up this bread. If you don't have a mixer, you can certainly still make the bread by hand. You can either knead it by hand, or you can just do a few stretch and folds to help develop the gluten and let it maybe set a little bit longer than what we're going to do here. But I really like the mixer because it does help to develop the gluten, and again, when we're talking about this bread, we're talking about making it when you're in a hurry, and so the mixer makes that a lot easier. So to the bowl of my stand mixer, I am adding 2.5 cups of warm milk, 1 cup of sourdough discard, 2 tablespoons of butter, 2 tablespoons of sugar, 2 tablespoons of active yeast. I've also made it with instant yeast if that's all I have, but active dry yeast is better. 2 teaspoons of salt, and then we're going to add 6 to 7 cups of flour until we see the dough pull away from the sides of the bowl as it mixes. And so, as you can imagine, it takes less than 2 minutes for me to put all of this stuff into the bowl of the mixer, and then the rest of the time it's just mixing, and then I shape it quick and stick it in the oven after it rises a second time. So it's very hands-off. I can mix this up really quick while I'm eating breakfast, or even at lunchtime if I want it in time for supper. And a couple things to note here is that I usually get my yeast from Azure Standard. It's just so much cheaper than buying it at the store. And again, the yeast in this recipe is just going to help the bread raise, since we're using sourdough discard, which is not in its active state. So instead of counting on the sourdough to raise this bread or to leaven it, we are going to be counting on the yeast to help us leaven it. But we still have the sourdough component, not only for taste, but to add a bit of health benefits as well. And we're just going to add flour until it pulls away from the edge of the bowl, which you can see it doing here. And I just let it knead for 6 or 7 minutes, and then I'm just going to shut it off, cover it, and let it rise until double, and it's usually an hour or 2, just until it's puffed up nice. And then it's time to shape. So I'm just going to use a little bit of beef tallow, or you can use butter or oil or whatever you want to grease my pans. And I don't always wash my pans in between. I think that they sort of develop a seasoning. And, if your bread doesn't stick, there's really not a need to wash your bread pans, especially when you bake sometimes 2 and 3 times a week. And so this dough got almost a little bit too happy. The temperature, as I mentioned, was really hot the day that I made this bread. So anyway, but it's going to be just fine. So you're going to see we're just going to pull this out, shape it into a couple of loaves. It is just a bit sticky just because it rose, and so much in the temperature in my house is warm. It's close to 80 degrees, but it always turns out beautifully and makes the best sandwiches, so not to worry. Now keep in mind, if you make this same bread in the winter, it may take a little bit longer to rise, but you're working with more of like a yeast dough here than a sourdough, so it's going to be a lot more like a regular yeast bread. And so you're just going to let it rise until double and then shape. So you can see it's a little bit sticky, but it's still okay. If you do some slap folds on the counter, it still comes together. I'm going to add just a little bit of flour just so that it doesn't stick to my hands as much. You wouldn't have to do that, because again, this is going to raise up and be super happy and fine. And so you don't have to even add, the flour for shaping, but it's just because it was so warm in my house. But it works out okay. So I just tuck it under and stick it right into the loaf pan, and do the same with the other loaf. And then we're going to cover these with a tea towel and let them rise. And if your house is really warm, it won't take very long. Sometimes even 30 minutes is long enough. Then we're just going to preheat our oven for 375 degrees. You can see these are a little bit over risen, and that again is because it is so warm in my house, and I was outside harvesting some cucumbers and basil from the garden, and I got back as quick as I could. But this is kind of what the bread looks like. But you're going to see it turns out just fine. You could punch this down and let it raise again if you wanted to, but this is going to be just fine. You will see that it will turn out beautifully. It'll be nice golden brown, have a beautiful crumb, and we'll just brush it with a little butter. And this will make the most delicious sandwiches, or French toast, or regular toast. It's just always great to have on hand. And again, it freezes well also. So I would encourage you to check out my blog, wagonwheelhomestead.com, and find the full printable recipe. And I hope that you really enjoy this sandwich bread. If you have any questions on sourdough baking or questions in general, be sure to drop them in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.